These are 3 of SpongeBob's saddest episodes of all time. The third one being Welcome to the Chum Bucket. The episode starts at closing time at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs locks up and tells SpongeBob he has plans to smoke Plankton and cards. SpongeBob is confused and wonders why Mr. Krabs would ever want to play his arch enemy in cards. And it's because Plankton is the worst card player in Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs has literally been robbing him for 15 years straight and has not lost once. Something bad must have happened though, because the next morning comes and Mr. Krabs shows up to work literally crying. And so SpongeBob gets to work and asks how the card game went. And somehow Mr. Krabs lost. SpongeBob starts to panic and he thinks he lost the Krusty Krab or the secret formula until Mr. Krabs tells him what really happened.
I lost you.
Mr. Krabs bet SpongeBob's employee contract in a card game with Plankton. So now SpongeBob has to work for Plankton at the Chum Bucket. So Plankton shows up and gives SpongeBob his new uniform. And this hat is very ugly. SpongeBob begs Mr. Krabs to let him keep his job, and Plankton literally has to pry off Mr. Krabs' arms with a crowbar, but he gives them back. Then Plankton admits to something crazy. He says he's purposely been throwing the card games to Mr. Krabs, just waiting for him to slip up. He may not have the formula of the Krabby Patties, but he has the next best thing, the guy who makes the Krabby Patties. So Plankton locks SpongeBob in a cage and forces him to go to the Chum Bucket to start his new job. SpongeBob is now at the Chum Bucket, and this place looks like some messed up torture chamber. Like, what is going on with this grill? And of course, Plankton wants SpongeBob to make him a Krabby Patty, and he says if he doesn't, he's gonna take SpongeBob's brain and put it into his robot Bob, which sounds insane. Next, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs have a heartwarming duet, which shows that they really miss each other. One thing I really like about this episode is that it really shows how much Mr. Krabs actually cares about SpongeBob, and that's something I never would have thought, to be honest. I mean, he kind of treats him like trash in some episodes. Anyways, Plankton wants to just remove SpongeBob's brain and stick it in the robot, but Karen tells him he should try showing SpongeBob compassion and be understanding to get the formula. Plankton tries to do everything in his power to make SpongeBob more comfortable at the Chum Bucket, like getting him a new grill, and he goes as far as making an entire replica of the Krusty Krab kitchen for SpongeBob, but all it does is make him think of Mr. Krabs and he starts crying. And so Plankton gets an idea. He asks him if there was anything Mr. Krabs would never let him have, and it's these fire-looking shoes. And so Plankton spends the entire day doing anything SpongeBob wants. And I think SpongeBob starts taking advantage of Plankton because he starts having him do the most random junk, but doesn't seem like he's ever gonna make him a Krabby Patty. Plankton asks SpongeBob to make him a Krabby Patty one last time, and this dude goes, nah, I don't feel like it. So Plankton is done with being nice to SpongeBob and decides to go with plan B, removing his brain and putting it inside of a robot. But even Robot Bob tells Plankton he's not making him a Krabby Patty, and this drives him insane. Also, the Krusty Krab is literally about to go out of business until Plankton shows up literally begging Mr. Krabs to take SpongeBob back. Plankton says SpongeBob is a literal nightmare. Mr. Krabs acts like he doesn't want SpongeBob back, so Plankton also costs up $50. So now SpongeBob can go back to Krusty Krab where he belongs. Also, the fact that Plankton actually removed SpongeBob's brain and just put a band-aid over it, like this dude probably has brain damage now. But this episode is a classic and enjoyable to watch. But it was sad seeing how SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs react to losing each other. This also shows that they have a very codependent relationship. After losing SpongeBob for only a few days, Mr. Krabs almost has to put the Krusty Krab out of business. Although Mr. Krabs is usually set on being greedy and cold, this episode showed a whole new side of him and showed that he deeply cares about SpongeBob, more than any normal boss cares about his employee. SpongeBob also gets really depressed without Mr. Krabs, and it changes his entire personality. I think the saddest part of this episode is that Plankton genuinely tries to be a good boss and gives SpongeBob anything he asks for, but still gets rejected. The second saddest episode is Are You Happy Now? The episode starts off at the Krusty Krab, and the first thing we see is Patrick literally eating out of the garbage like a rat. Squidward tries to give SpongeBob an order for a Krabby Patty, but he's too invested in whatever book he's reading, sitting there laughing and smiling his head off. Squidward grabs the book, and it's literally just the Krusty Krab work schedule. The Krusty Krab is where all my happiest memories occurred. Squidward throws the book on the grill, and it burns up in seconds, which is kind of weird because didn't SpongeBob literally just have it on the grill and it was fine? Anyways, it doesn't matter because SpongeBob has a whole cabinet of backup books. This makes SpongeBob ask Squidward what his happiest memory is, but he can't remember a single one. This makes SpongeBob really sad, so he wants to help Squidward. This also makes Squidward admit how miserable he is, and he's actually willing to let SpongeBob help him make him a happy memory. And this is actually kind of crazy for Squidward to agree to. So SpongeBob and Squidward go to a concert, but a fish launches a violin bow right into Squidward's eyes. Ow. Their next stop is an art museum, and at first it's actually going really well because one of Squidward's sculptures is on display. This next part is really sad though, because a really famous fish that Squidward admires literally takes a flamethrower to his art. This guy cannot catch a break. So then SpongeBob tries taking Squidward on a hot air balloon date, but of course Squidward is afraid of heights. Instead of just letting them down gently, SpongeBob just straight up pops the balloon and they crash right into Mount Bikini. And then some hiker gets to the top of the mountain and he's really upset because he trained 20 years for this, just for SpongeBob and Squidward to just crash up there. And then to top it off, SpongeBob takes the hiker's flag and smashes it right into Squidward's foot. And when he takes it out, it causes a whole avalanche. What the heck? After this, Squidward just accepts the fact that he will never have a happy memory. And if he does, it definitely won't involve SpongeBob. Squidward slips into depression, and he literally doesn't leave his house for weeks. SpongeBob obviously gets really worried about Squidward, and he goes to check on him. His house is a wreck, and Squidward looks miserable. Squidward continues to push SpongeBob away until SpongeBob faxes himself to his house. Hi, Squidward. Okay, this part is actually so weird. So first, SpongeBob becomes a piece of paper. Then he gets shredded. Then Gary puts him back together. Like, what? So Squidward tries to get a little clam pet, but even that goes wrong. This episode literally gives this man no breaks at all. He gets a knock on the door, and he's expecting it to be SpongeBob, but it's just a mailman with the package. At first, the package seems empty, but turns out SpongeBob was hiding in the box with another box. He traps Squidward in the box and brings him to the Krusty Krab with one last desperate attempt to give Squidward his happiest memory. SpongeBob decided to throw Squidward a party, and since everyone he invited made an excuse not to go, SpongeBob used paper mache to fill the party with your favorite person, which is just a bunch of him. This sends Squidward from depression into a psychopathic rage. He runs around like a crazy person, demolishing all the paper SpongeBobs. I don't think this is what SpongeBob was going for, but since Squidward finally got his happiest memory, he's satisfied. It seems like SpongeBob had his mind focused on other things anyways. He's so handsome. Whoa, SpongeBob. This episode was not only really sad, but straight up just hard to watch. Squidward has always been known to be a sad character who gets tortured for fun, but this episode painted his depression in a whole new light. There are a lot of people with depression, but most of them have at least one happy memory. Squidward literally has none. Nothing at all in his life makes him want to keep living, which is extremely sad to think about. This episode also makes a lot of references to unaliving yourself. First, when SpongeBob goes to check on Squidward, he goes, "At least we know he's alive." Then Squidward also puts his head in the oven, and then he also literally ties up a rope, which is insane for a kid show. It also makes me sad that SpongeBob tried his hardest to be a good friend of Squidward, but all he ever does is make him more miserable and in pain. But the next episode is even sadder. So finally, the saddest episode of SpongeBob is Have You Seen This Snail? The episode starts off with SpongeBob carrying this massive bag of snail food, and this thing looks heavy. But SpongeBob is also really weak, so who knows? Patrick tries talking to SpongeBob, but because of the heavy snail food, he rushes home. This is when SpongeBob notices a note on his door. Apparently, he's expecting a delivery, and he missed it. It doesn't really matter though, because the delivery shows up in the next minute. There is a big problem though. SpongeBob is so excited about this package, he completely forgets about Gary's food. SpongeBob opens up his package, which is just like a little paddle with a ball attached. He also finds a note, which tells him about the Dirty Bubble Challenge. And this challenge is insane. SpongeBob has to hit the ball 29 trillion times in a row. Yeah, that's pretty impossible. I don't even know why he would attempt this. Gary tries to get his attention because it's his feeding time, but bad pet owner SpongeBob completely ignores and neglects Gary. Once he realizes that he's not gonna get fed, he packs a bag and decides to move out. Gary goes out on his own and gets on his bus. I hope he finds some food. I don't know how he's gonna find some food, but anyways, Patrick goes to visit SpongeBob, but something is really wrong. SpongeBob's entire house is a wreck, and he finds SpongeBob in a corner looking like he's rotting. How long did he spend trying to do this challenge? Patrick asks SpongeBob what happened. He tells him, "I took the Dirty Bubble Challenge," which clearly upsets Patrick for some reason. Apparently, Patrick beat the Dirty Bubble Challenge, and he just lost the trophy. I mean, I know Patrick's really dumb, so is he even able to lie about something like that? This is when SpongeBob finally remembers to feed Gary, except he can't find him anywhere. SpongeBob finally asks how long he's been doing this challenge, and somehow Patrick's able to tell him how long he was doing it for by eating his expired milk, which is pretty disgusting. SpongeBob was doing this challenge for 10 days straight. How did he go 10 days without remembering Gary? The sad part too is he could have just fed Gary and then tried doing the challenge. We cut back to Gary, who is still really hungry and wandering out in the wild. SpongeBob tries to shake Gary's treats to lure him out, but of course Patrick eats them, so they have to shake Patrick's fat belly instead. SpongeBob and Patrick even break into Squidward's house, and we get this really long, awkward pause. They find no trace of Gary until SpongeBob opens up his mailbox and finds a heartbreaking note. First of all, I have no idea how he read this, but Gary wrote that he's looking for a new owner who actually remembers to feed him, which is very sad. So Gary is out wandering through the city looking for food, but he doesn't have much luck until he finds some nachos. Gary runs away because there are other wild snails, but turns out they were going to share with him. He runs into a scary looking dark figure, but turns out it's just some really old lady.
"There you are, Mrs. Toofsy."
This lady definitely has some problems, but at least she spoils Gary with food and a heated blanket. Grandma turns on some music and oh my, bro, look at Grandma. For an old lady, she can get down. Anyway, SpongeBob is searching through the entire city, and it's really sad seeing how heartbroken he is over Gary. We see that Gary also misses SpongeBob, but he's a little traumatized from being yelled at by him. Also, losing Gary really took a toll on SpongeBob. He spends all night looking for him and comes into work the next morning looking disgusting. He tries to tell Mr. Krabs that he's not okay, but Mr. Krabs just sends him to the grill anyways. This is an example of Mr. Krabs looking like a bad boss, but earlier he was a good boss, so maybe he's like bipolar. Anyway, SpongeBob sits there crying on all of the Krabby Patties, and people obviously start complaining. Also, how are these tears sitting so perfectly on the Krabby Patty? It makes no sense. Mr. Krabs tries to convince SpongeBob to focus on work, but instead, he accidentally convinces him to look harder for Gary. SpongeBob goes back to Patrick and tells him that they should keep looking for Gary. We go back to Grandma and Mrs. Toofsy, and although Granny is nice, her love seems to be a little too much. She is only giving Gary fish food instead of snail food. SpongeBob goes around the city putting up flyers everywhere. And luckily, SpongeBob and Gary end up at the exact same store. Patrick sees that they're having a sale on scented pie cones and literally talks to the lady that has Gary, but Patrick doesn't even tell SpongeBob. He even goes, "Hi, Gary." Anyways, next, one of the most heartbreaking yet iconic songs in SpongeBob history plays.
Gary, now I know I was wrong. I messed up and now you're gone.
SpongeBob goes into a deep depression and is desperate to get his pet back. He puts up flyers everywhere, and we even see his cute photo album, a SpongeBob and Gary's memories. Gary is back at Grandma's house, and she gives him some paper so he can use the bathroom. And this is when Gary sees all those flyers that SpongeBob's been leaving around. Gary tries to leave and head for the door and accidentally makes a crazy discovery. This lady has been killing all of her pet snails by feeding them too much. Gary tries running away from Grandma, but she chases him with cookies and deviled eggs. It's kind of funny that Gary and the Grandma move at the same pace too. Gary comes across another snail and uses him as bait to get away. Does anyone else think it's kind of weird that literally every other snail but Gary can talk? Anyways, we go back to SpongeBob, and when Patrick hears Gary's name, he looks like he's about to tell SpongeBob he saw him, but instead he literally talks about some wood he saw. Great. Gary loved balsa wood. SpongeBob goes outside and pleads to the billboard of Gary how much he messed up. And at this exact moment, Gary comes up to SpongeBob and purrs on him. And he goes, "Gary, your purr's making it really hard to forget about you." This is when SpongeBob and Gary finally have their touching reunion, and everything ends on a good note. Wow. This episode was sad. Seeing SpongeBob, the happiest character ever, go into a deep depression and grieve his beloved pet snail was heartbreaking. I hate to say it, but I think he needed to lose Gary so he could form a deeper appreciation for his pet and take better care of him. But I don't know. I'm just watching TV, watching TV, SpongeBob's saddest episode. That's what I'm watching. That saddest episode, SpongeBob's saddest episode, SpongeBob's watching SpongeBob's saddest episode, SpongeBob's the 3 episodes of SpongeBob's saddest episodes. I can't do that.